the reason bigger companies get into craft breweries is not because they want to change it and they want to drown us. They, in the way I look at it, which is a very different approach than most people, is that the big guys are buying craft breweries because they've realized they can't necessarily compete. So if you can't compete and you can't push them out of business,
can't beat them.
Why not own them? Why not own them and collect the revenue?
Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Y'all are brewheads? Yeah, we brewheads. So pour a glass of craft beer, we can do this. Yeah.
Audio rolling? What a great start.
Oh, it's going to be the best.
Every 5 minutes.
Well, what's good, y'all? This is C Certified Brewhead.
And I am Scott Beer, cold beer enthusiast.
And welcome to episode 48 of Beer Nuts, the podcast. And today we are at Magic Hat. Is it Art of Factory or Art Factory?
Artifactory.
Artifactory here in South Burlington, Vermont. And we're Chris Rockwell. Thank you for being here.
Chris, thanks for having us, man.
Rockwood.
God damn it.
It's okay. It's okay.
Are you the head brewer?
On my better days, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us, man.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us. This is such a sick facility, eh? It's crazy. It's huge.
We're very proud of our brewery. It's been growing for 23 years almost, and in this building for about 19. So
nice.
We love it.
You guys are one of the first guys in the game, really, especially in Vermont, one of the forerunners in the craft beer scene.
Kind of. We kind of came in what I would call middle of the pack.
Okay.
Mid 90s, 94 is when we started. There was a few other guys that paved the way before us. Greg Noonan fought and battled for legislation to allow brew pubs in the state of Vermont. So he founded Vermont Pub and Brewery in the mid to late 80s.
Wow.
And that kind of really opened the gates for things to get started. But some of the biggest originals were, Catamount, Vermont Pub and Brewery. Long Trail's been around for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Otter Creek and Woolivers were right around the same time as us, or just a little bit before. But
that's crazy because the 80s, like craft beer was on the map. I was born in the 80s. I feel like it's more of a newer sensation, but I guess not. I guess it started, just wasn't as big, so it wasn't as
and very, very, very niche, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's been growing. The predecessors that got stuff started were really taking pretty giant risks. On the larger scale of around the U.S., you got guys like Jim Cook, Ken Grossman, that really, put things into perspective and started this whole more flavor, more styles. In the U.S., that's been around for, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, globally. So in the U.S., it's a very new thing, but there's been some amazing beer styles made historically for much longer than anybody in the U.S. can take credit for.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Tell us about your beer story. I feel like people really love to hear that. You've been here a while, so it'd be fascinating to see how that went down.
I have a kind of interesting beer story. So it all started in college, actually, and keep doing that. It's going to kill me eventually. In a brewery, there are brewery sounds. You just kind of go with it.
That's one of them, like a bird.
But so my journey into beer started in college. I actually went to college just down the road in Colchester at St. Michael's, and the first time I walked into the Winooski beverage store, which has become renowned for the place to go for bottles and anything different, I kind of walked in and I was like, there's a lot of stuff. And they're like, oh, that's just all beer. I was like, wait, what? Like, that's a thing? That's all beer? So it was always, you pick up your bulk beer that you were going to consume for most of the night, and then you pick up a 6-pack of anything off the shelf. Because it was, all right, let's try that. Let's try that. And fortunately, after college, I was taking the summer off, trying to figure out what the heck to do with my life. I'd worked construction through summers and breaks for the years before that, and it just so happened that Magic Hat was hiring a promotional person where I was living. So I was like, I can do beer promos. Love beer. And managed to execute that pretty well, turned it into a full-time sales job. Decided that I really wasn't cut out to work sales at the age of 23, and took a job on the kegging line here, and that was 8.5 years ago that I started on the keg line.
Nice.
learned the keg line, learned the centrifuge, learned the filter, ran the fermentation room, trained people in the fermentation room for a while. Eventually got a lead cellar position and parlayed it into the head brewing job in November of 13. So
amazing.
It's been a long road of learning and work, but it's been fantastic.
That's great.
Very very grateful for a lot of the guys that were here before me that taught me. Some of the guys are running some of the other best breweries around the state now. JP over at Von Trapp, Todd, who's working down at Foam and House of Fermentology. Matt is at Fiddlehead. Justin's over at Zero Gravity on Pine Street. We have a couple guys up at 14 Star. A couple guys at Lost Nation. There's Mark, I came up with here at Magic Hat. We started a week apart. Is now running River Roost down in White River Junction.
I heard about that last night. Yeah.
I've had the joy of working with some really talented brewers that were kind enough to help train me throughout the process. So.
Did you do the 5-gallon homebrew thing at any point, or did you start on the big equipment and learn on the big equipment? Did you go straight to the bike, or were there any training wheels before?
Good question.
One of my roommates was an avid home brewer, and I helped out a little, but I just dove right in.
Sweet.
So, I consider myself the spoiled brat of the brewing industry because I've had the years of working here and training under some really talented guys, but with tools such as, a digital Gehaltometer to measure CO2 levels and other stuff. So, it's not something that's lost upon me in terms of the luck I've had getting into the industry and the ability I've had to train with some really great brewers. So, I just dove in. Then it's working out. So,
is there something special about Magic Hat that has pumped out these brewers that have gone on to do some crazy stuff themselves?
I think one of the things that has surrounded this brewery forever is that we still do primary open fermentation, which is somewhat of a lost art. There's a lot of places inside the U.S. that do some open fermentation, 1, 2, maybe 3 tanks. We currently have 15 tanks in our open fermentation room that do, about 1,100 barrels of open fermentation every week.
Right.
And what that kind of breeds is dedication to detail, whether it's detail on ingredients, detail on sanitation, that I think all these guys were able to really hone here and then take to their own places and develop new flavors, new styles.
Right.
But most breweries that are larger scale production breweries have that history of turning out really talented brewers, mostly because it gives you that reverence of, knowing that if you're producing beer that's going to a bunch of states, quality is key, and quality is absolutely king. So if you cut a corner here on cleaning a tank, or don't spray down that section of the room, the whole place goes to shit.
Yeah. No, you can cut.
No, absolutely.
I never know.
Shit,
So I think that having the open fermentation room and just having some really open guys who are willing to train is part of it. Now that I'm in the head brewing role, if I'm doing my job right, I should be losing staff members every once in a while to either start their own places or move on to lead in head roles at other breweries, because that's part of it.
Part of the
training
game, right?
And letting people explore what they want to do is part of being in the brewing world. So,
a couple of things actually I want to touch on. This beer is from the Vermont only series. Do you want to speak to that, because that's super cool?
Yeah. So one of the things that can happen to anybody as you grow is you turn your focus to larger scale markets.
Right.
Right now Magic Hat's distributed in 42 states.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of different people, a lot of different tastes to keep happy.
Yes.
And in doing so, and in because we've had such great success here and growing, one of the things we kind of forgot to do was look back to the people that allowed us to get success in the first place, which is the home and local market. So The Vermont Only series is us partnering with 20 bars and restaurants around the state that are some of the best craft beer destinations in Vermont right now, and providing one log each month of a different beer of some really elevated styles that speak to what the general drinker around Vermont wants, and kind of, giving back to the people that allowed us to get so big. Vermont has a history of support local, drink local, and which is fantastic. It allows a lot of the breweries to exist. And we kind of forgot to, as much as we do some big events that donate to local charities and stuff like that, we just kind of misstepped and forgot to take care of some of our own for a little bit. So this is our chance to show that we didn't forget. We just stumbled a little bit, and we're back
in a different direction.
So the other side is it's a chance for myself and the brewing team to just really go bananas style-wise. So the first beer was an IPA. This is a double IPA. We're working on a Doppelbock with a whole bunch of local maple.
Nice.
We're going to work on a smoked Helles style. We're going to be working on a Russian Imperial Stout for later in the year.
Big stuff, eh? Lots of big, bold.
Big stuff.
High ABV for the most part? Or?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
We have a Saison for March that's only 5.7, but really delightful. We're going to work on an ESB with some local ingredients. We're going to work on a smoked beer with a local partner, Vermont Smoking Cure, that does smoked meats, bacon, ham, all that kind of stuff, and a local malt stir, Peterson Malt. And they're going to produce... The idea is they're going to produce the malt. We may have Vermont Smoking Cure smoke it to do either a Marzen or Oktoberfest or something for the fall. But we're going to explore styles that Magic Hat as a brewery hasn't necessarily done a lot of. And it's just an excuse for myself and the brewers to play. It's a playground. As much as it's a playground, we are doing a bunch of trial batches ahead of time to make sure that we're delivering on flavor and overall profile. So it's not just a, hey, we put this together, take it. We're honing the recipes in, but it's our playground. It's our chance to, show that while we put in the work to do the big stuff, we can also do the small stuff and do the cool stuff well. So
is the number 9 still your number one seller? Here you produce the most. What percentage is number 9 you're selling? And because I know you guys have a wide range of different styles and types of beer, but I feel like this has been your flagship beer, and it's kind of what you're known for.
Number 9 pays the bills. For sure. I think I'll have to check my math, but I think it's right around 50 or 51% of everything we make and sell right now.
Cool.
The interesting thing with number 9 is that when we launched number 9, I think it was around 95 or 96, it was supposed to be a seasonal. And then as the season was coming to a close, everybody was like, if you stop selling this, we're going to cut you. So we listened. We kept making it. Didn't get cut, thankfully.
Very important.
It took on a whole life of its own that grew. Obviously, it's a lighter style. It's based on a classic English pale with some two-row caramel 80 and some Apollo and Cascade hops, 5.1%. So it's not necessarily, if you're looking for a giant double IPA,
it's not that.
It's not that. But it's an easy, really good, really refreshing go-to beer when you need that. I'm a big believer in every style has its time and place. Whether
you always said that.
I always say that.
We were just talking about that before. So being that the flagship beer is somewhat of an approachable, for like an entry level, it's not going to scare away the craft or the new people who are new to craft. Would you define Magic Hat as somewhat of a not a gateway brewery, but like all the beers I've had from you guys have been
approachable, right?
Approachable is the word I'm looking for. Thank you. And I mean that in a really positive way, because I feel like they get not a bad rap, but they don't get enough props in the sense of like there's the craft beer market, 12% of the states, but then the other 7, whatever it is, 88%. Like
these are great beers to pull some.
I know you have some
people
crazy
over.
shit. You know, we've had the Belgian Quad. I've had a bunch of the other ones that I'm like, oh, you know, even like those ones are intense for me as a beer nerd. So I know, but I feel like you guys have a larger amount of approachable beers than some other breweries. Is that intentional?
I would say to a certain extent, yes.
Yep.
You know, one of the things that I've always said, and one of my big philosophies around beer is I will always be a beer appreciator and a beer promoter, but I will check myself at the door and refrain from where it gets into some dangerous or potential like snobbish categories.
Right.
You know, so beer is meant to be enjoyed by the masses. Like it's supposed to be a drink for the people. So far be it from me to say that the number of people that are buying number 9 or buying the approachable styles all the time are wrong.
Right.
I understand there are going to be different tastes, and you're not always going to please every drinker all the time.
No.
But beer doesn't have to be this crazy sacred thing that's like, ooh, I was able to get this one bottle once, and it's on this giant pedestal, and I'm going to pour 4 ounces, and it's going to be like, you know, a come to Jesus moment. Like, sometimes you just need a beer that is well-made, defect-free, and good and refreshing.
Right.
Now, obviously, you can do that across a number of styles, but having, to me, the humility to make something that's approachable and can even tickle the people who don't lean towards giant IPAs is a good thing.
Right.
You know, as a brewer, if I can't and my staff can't brew all styles well, then we've got some work to do. So.
Okay, interesting. Just wasn't sure as far as if there was somewhat of a, like, you went out there, because you said this was a fluke. Not a fluke, but like it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like, hey, I'm going to make a beer that everybody loves, and that's what's going to keep the lights on type of thing.
Well, it was intended to be a beer that everybody loves, but at the time it was only supposed to be seasonal.
A one-off, a seasonal,
Right.
and then people loved it so much, kept it on, and that's become your flagship beer now, really.
Yeah. So, you know, far be it from me or anybody else inside the company to say, like, you know, if everybody loves this, no, we won't give it to you. I mean, you know, we have the ability, being with we've been around for 23 years. We have a pretty large-scale production brewery right now, so we can make things in quantity. And I understand why some breweries want to stay smaller. It's just a different business model, and it, you know, to each their own. There's nothing wrong with doing smaller scale stuff. There's nothing wrong with growing to a certain size and being happy with it.
Right.
We just happen to go a different direction and have grown beyond just the state, and are in 42 states currently, and you know, it's just what it is.
Right. So speaking of that, someone who's been to the, I guess it's important to talk about the fact that Magic Hat was bought out in 2010. 2010.
Okay. Yes.
And you being here for 10 years, you lived through that.
Yep.
And I feel like it's one thing that in craft beer, it's like the big, like, elephant in the room type of thing, or, you know, it's unspoken for the most part. And we don't think we've ever actually spoken to anybody who, I guess because we don't really interview macro brewers, and we haven't spoken to one that has been bought out. So this is fascinating for us to actually get first-hand experience to be like, all right,
from
so
someone on the inside,
and who stuck around clearly for the last 7 years. So clearly, you know, whatever happened in the internal part of Magic Hat was not this big devil came in and took it over. So I'd love to get just perspective from your side of how that felt. You know, what happened when it changed, and did you see any cultural changes on the inside, or, you know, just how that looked like?
Yeah. So to kick it off, I'm gonna swing through a quick anecdote.
Yes.
So a couple of years back, we did a collaboration brew with Vermont Pub and Brewery.
Yes.
It was called Stephen Sour. It was a passion fruit IPA that was slightly sour from using passion fruit in the fermentation vessel.
Damn.
And so I had recently come on board as the head brewer. I had been here for a while, and because I had just started, we were scheduled to do like the first pilot batch on their, you know, 1 gallon or 1 barrel system or half barrel system, like I don't know, a couple weeks or a couple months after I started.
Oh, okay.
And so I showed up and met with Russ, who's the brewer there. Thankfully, I had known Steve Polowasek, who was Greg Noonan's original partner for quite some time, but showed up and met Russ there. And he kind of looked at me really funny. He's like, well, you have work pants on, you're in a t-shirt, you have safety glasses, and you have brewing boots, and you clearly look like you're ready to actually work. I was like, yeah. He was like, I just kind of assumed it was going to be, you know, some suit type that's like, hey, I'm the head brewer and I don't touch anything. And it was a wonderful experience because he was just like, wow, I kind of forgot. I just assumed that, you know, since there was somebody new coming in, you would have been like some new guy from the big parent company.
Right.
But so through the history and from being privately held to growing a little bit, the whole story of the buyout was kind of Magic Hat purchased Pyramid Brewing Company in 2008. There was a couple things that went on economically, slightly over leveraged. So at that time, when Magic Hat bought Pyramid, they formed Independent Brewers United as like a holding company type.
Right.
It was the same people here. It was just an umbrella corporation to own the two breweries. And then in 2010, after things had kind of gone sideways with the economy, you know, 2008 was a really bad year.
Yeah.
2009 wasn't a great year either. North American Breweries bought the entirety of Independent Brewers United. So North American Breweries...
who are they?
So they're based in Rochester, New York. Okay. They own and operate the Genesee High Falls Brewing Company. They have the distribution rights to Labatt USA.
Right.
They do Genesee. They now own Magic Hat, Pyramid. They own JW Dundee's.
The brewery.
Honey Brown. It's an older craft brewery that's fizzled, I think. But so they have a few different things, and they do a bunch of different production.
Right. So they're not. I'm sorry to cut you there. I hadn't heard of. So what is it? North American Breweries.
North American Breweries. Yeah.
So I've never heard of it because I thought it's always AB, right? Like who else always buys people out or SAB or something. Is that? It just sounds like a private company. It's like a larger company. Is it considered a because it's not a macro brewery that bought it out, though, right?
Well, like yes and no. We're getting there. There's more to the story.
Okay.
No.
Continue.
So North American Breweries was run by private equity at the time.
Okay.
A couple of years later, 2012, the private equity firm that founded and started North American Breweries sold the entirety of North American Breweries to Cerveceria Costa Rica, which is the brewing arm of Florida Ice and Farm Company. So Cerveceria Costa Rica makes Imperial. So if you go to Puerto Rica, if you go to Costa Rica, you drink Imperial. That's like... so we're owned now by Cerveceria Costa Rica.
It's North American Brewing Company who owns Magic Hat.
Yeah.
That's the chain. So
that's the large-scale business side of it all. But
makes sense.
Through all that buyout, essentially what has happened is that the reason bigger companies get into craft breweries is not because they want to change it and they want to drown us. They, you know, in the way I look at it, which is a very different approach than most people, is that the big guys are buying craft breweries because they've realized they can't necessarily compete. So if you can't compete and you can't push them out of business,
can't beat them.
Why not own them? Why not own them and collect the revenue? Which is probably an unpopular opinion, but it's the way I see it. Because being here as long as I have, they didn't change the ingredients we use. They didn't change the way we make beer. They didn't change our access to ingredients, although we now kind of have better access to ingredients.
Right.
You know, from the production standpoint, nothing changed. They bought us. We still employ about 50 people here at the brewery in South Burlington. We have another 30 people that are part of the foundry, as we call them, that are our creative marketing, art department, all that, web design department. So there's 80 people employed locally that all are either from Vermont or transplants like myself that have been living in Vermont for quite some time, that work here. And so I understand the moral approach to wanting to support local and wanting to support small. But just because somebody's owned doesn't necessarily change the beer at all.
Right.
It can. It hasn't changed anything here.
Okay. How about internally, like internal company culture? Because I guess, and sounds like there's two steps. There was one when North American Breweries took it over, and then one when the service area Costa Rica came in.
So it's been somewhat fluid. Obviously, anytime there's major change, things are going to be in flux.
Of course.
But through all of it, the one thing that the parent company has come to understand is that just because you're all one large company doesn't mean you can force a single culture on anybody.
Right.
So we're allowed to operate the way we operate. We have the freedom and flexibility to do what we want to do and how we want to do it. We may need to explain to them why it works and how it works, but that's just like anything. I mean, if you were a kid and you asked your parents to go out on a Friday night till 2:30 in the morning when you were 16, they kind of wanted to know where you were going, what you were doing, and why.
Yeah.
Reasonable.
Right.
So it's it's kind of like we have this cool uncle that has a bigger piggy bank that allows us to say, we really want to get a couple new tanks because we want to explore some new styles, or we want to upgrade this piece of equipment for better efficiency.
Right.
And they can say, okay, we have the money, go for it. And they, we've been fortunate in that they believe in everything we do here at Magic Hat, and they have invested pretty heavily in, some infrastructure and changes. So it's a weird thing. I understand where people come from when they kind of turn their back to it.
Yeah.
That's fine. But we're just brewers making beer.
Yeah.
For me, it's the ability to pursue my passion and really get to do things almost on a grander scale because we have that cool uncle with the big bank account.
They'll hook you up here now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So.
Okay. Have you had anyone, and tell me if this is too invasive, but like, have you had anyone within the beer scene, do you feel that yourself or any of the other employees here at Magic Hat get treated slightly different or like shunned or anything like that from other local breweries or anything like that?
The one thing I can say locally, at least in the state of Vermont, I've had the joy of being part of the Vermont Brewers Association, and the unequivocal answer locally is no. Everybody understands, that we're here, we're still brewers, we're still making beer.
And you didn't make the decision, it was
right. It was nobody on the production floor.
Hey.
It's big business.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, big business rears its nasty, or what some people consider a nasty head.
Yeah.
It goes, but the local community is not only supportive and embraces myself and the rest of the brewers, but they're excited to see some level of give back to the local community too, because there's nothing worse than being that big guy that forgets their roots entirely and just storms off. And we haven't done that and won't do that. So people are great. The brewing industry as a whole. Obviously, some people will say, I don't drink that stuff anymore. It's going to somebody else. And it's like, okay.
Right.
But, to me, and kind of in line with what I've said before, like, beer is beer. And if you like it, drink it. If you want to have other motivations for why you support certain companies or not, that's awesome. Go for it. Live your life. We don't have to fight as much as we can.
Let's all just be friends and drink good beer together. I don't see why not.
That's why we're here, right? I mean,
that's why we're here.
Yes.
The good stuff.
Man, Chris, we really appreciate your time, man.
Man.
This has been a dope conversation and something that we haven't really covered on the podcast before, so thanks for your honesty.
Thank you for the tour.
Thank
you very much for coming.
Really enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it a lot.
Where can we find Magic Hat online?
So Magic Hat can be found online at www.magichat.net.
If you're in Vermont, come by.
Please,
it's such a cool
do.
tour.
Awesome brewery tour. I've been on it before, actually.
A tour
really
up
fun,
there
really
now.
cool place to be. Lots of swag, lots of beers to try at the bar.
Yeah, like there's literally a ton.
Come down, be here.
We have recently, so previously we always had up to about 8 or 9. We did some work in the cooler. We'll now have anywhere from 12 to 15 different beers on tap.
Can't go
6
wrong.
or 7 of them that you won't find anywhere else. So
Perfect. And
I
that's-
guarantee if you have some free samples, you're taking some home too. Because,
That's it. You
Yeah.
got the new cans. You got a bunch of new bottles. You can get this, the Raspberry Stout at least, and as well the Vermont
Growlers,
Only series.
everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the growlers too.
Yeah.
And check out the Vermont Only series, which I assume is going to be available here or just at those bars.
Available here on draft and in the bars.
At the bars? Perfect. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Review, rate the podcast. Subscribe to us on iTunes and on YouTube. And follow us on social media at BAOS Podcast. You know the drill. All the things in the details below. That's it. Thanks again, Chris. You're the man.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys.